Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have been waiting for 3 years basically to be able to do this, and we're so excited to be in person in 3 dimensions and to be able to come together as communities. I'm Wendy Chung. I'm what they call the principal investigator of Simon Searchlight, and we've got a whole team of people, some of whom you've met, some of whom you haven't, who are all behind the scenes. And I won't go through all of them right now, but there's an incredible army of people helping researchers to come together, helping families to come together, and we couldn't be more thrilled to be with you this weekend. So I'm going to give a brief introduction in terms of why we're here this weekend. We're recording this as well, so if any of you have people in your communities that you know of that aren't here in person, this will be for anyone in the future to be able to see, and I hope is a bit of an explanation about what we're up to, and to say that we're here, though, to get your feedback as we're doing this. We're doing this with you. We are iteratively making refinements and revisions as our understanding changes, as what we hear from researchers change, and as we learn more together. So I couldn't be prouder to have the 4 groups that are here partnered with us. All of you know who you are in terms of the family group leaders. I just want to thank you personally for what I know is an incredible amount of devotion, unpaid time and effort that you put into this. And I know the families in your groups appreciate your input as well. As we do this, and you may or may not have seen them, but they do have tags on their IDs that actually say researcher here. We have brought in researchers from around the world, literally, both in person as well as virtually, who are working for you. They are behind the scenes with their laboratories day in and day out, thinking very, very deeply about all of the biology. And we've been focusing them, especially at this meeting, to think about how do we get to treatments. And so we've really been pushing them in terms of thinking about that. For some of them, it comes very naturally. For some of them, it's a new adventure. But we've been doing that. And we welcome all of you who are researchers here. Do take the time, if you're a family member, to bump into them. It may seem kind of scary in terms of they speak another sort of scientific language, but I can tell you, because I know this from my own team, you will make, and your children will make, a lifelong lasting impression on them. And I'll give you a little hint, especially get to the younger researchers without the gray hair, because those are the people that you'll actually convert over to making lifelong dedicated scientists to your condition behind the scenes. So little tip from Wendy. Okay, so this is a jam-packed weekend. I know it's confusing because there are 2 kind of simultaneously things that are going on. We've got programs in this room and then across the hall. And also many of you have research sessions that are going on with your children over on the sort of the wing up on the 3rd floor, and then some on the 1st floor. And I apologize that sometimes it's a little bit of a juggle trying to figure out where you're supposed to be at any one time. I know I have that problem. But do look at your schedules overall for the program, as well as for your individual research schedules going on. And out here, there are also, if you're not signed up in Simon Searchlight, lots of stations to help you sign up and navigate the system or figure out where you're stuck or give feedback in terms of what we're doing. So as we're going through this, I just want to emphasize, I've been the leader for Simon Searchlight for over a decade now, and it's been, for me, just really exciting to see the field mature and going from, in some cases, seeing the very first person with a certain condition, and now seeing them blossom into communities of hundreds of individuals around the world. I will tell you all that you're not alone. I hope this meeting is about being able to find others to go on this journey with you. And I'll also emphasize that there are many, many more of you out there than know about your condition. And I think one of the things that we're really trying to think about how to do on scale is how to find those other individuals so that they can also come with us on this journey as we get to being able to improve lives. As we're doing this with Simon Searchlight, I want to say that, number one, we're in this for the long haul. This is not something, as you can tell, because we've been at this for over a decade, we're not coming and going. We're interested in being able to do this in a scalable way across the conditions that you represent. I know there's some confusion sometimes because you hear within Safari, there's this word autism, and it's very intentional that that word is there. But within Simon Searchlight, it is not defined by having a genetic or having a diagnosis of autism. And so it's defined really by the genetic condition and by the genes putting the communities together and allowing us to understand what's different in terms of the brain and behavior for those individuals that are in those communities. And so let me just be clear, because I know sometimes it gets confusing. We also know that in the world of rare genetic diseases that we have to globally work together, right? That we have very small numbers, and so we all have to band together. And we've been very, very committed in terms of making a global community. I will say that's sometimes not easy because we don't all speak just very simply the same language. I will say that it's gotten easier as we have even more and more ability to translate things relatively quickly and on the fly. And as we do this, we try and be a catalyst and a facilitator for good researchers to do good science, bringing together the communities of our families with our community of scientists, and in some cases in Safari, being able to have resources, enabling technologies, being able to aggregate data, being able to provide research grants, but really being a catalyst to moving that forward. Now, within this, it does take a partnership. And for those of you who know me, you'll know that what I'm going to say next is grounded in the sincere belief that every single person matters. And the reason for that is that, number one, our conditions are still rare. And number two, everyone is still a unique person. And so within that, they've had a unique experience in terms of how that is manifested within themselves. And in some cases, there's actually unique biology based on the genetic variants. And so within this, I don't want anyone to be left behind. It's really, really important to me that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from what we're learning. But if we have represented certain individuals with a certain experience and we leave other people outside of those research studies, the researchers will not work on them. And it's not because they're trying to exclude them, it's because they aren't represented. And I don't want us to have skewed treatments, supports, or experiences that don't reflect our entire community. So it's really important, if you see any reason why we're leaving someone behind, I want you to come up and tell me. I want you to help us to make this better so that we can remove those barriers and really be representative in terms of what we're doing. I also want to reassure you, because some people in the rare disease community get worried about privacy. They get concerned about, well, who's going to know about me? And are they finding out things about me that I don't want to make public? And I'm very well aware in terms of things like our Facebook communities that do allow us to bring together communities and share information. But I want to reassure you that any of the research you're participating in this weekend, anything that you've aggregated or donated in terms of either specimens, blood samples, or information assignment Searchlight, it's all completely de-identified. It is impossible to be able to come back to you and find your address or find and call you up or be able to harass you about anything. And we really, really take that very seriously. And so I want you to feel rest assured that as you're doing this, we are de-identifying any of the information you're providing as part of research, but we are making sure that that is then multiplied so that many, many researchers, when you, and I know it's hard, I know it's painful, like those questionnaires online, it's like, really? You're asking me again the same question that I've been asked 52 times before? I totally get it. But as you do that, we're trying to do it in this way so we don't ask you 52 times more after that, right? That this can be kind of one stop in terms of researchers being able to take that information and use it for many, many different studies. We also have many researchers, and I think this is going to increase a lot over time, who are going to use Simon Searchlight as a way of being able to invite you to additional studies. We call this research match. And as we do that, know that they also are providing the information back into Simon Searchlight so that organically this continues to grow in value and be able to have richer and richer data over time. And you don't have to, again, do those same questions 52 times over. So as we're doing this, I really feel down to the core that there are going to be transformational technologies coming in the future. And what I really want us as a community is to be able to be ready to go so that as soon as science develops some of those answers, some of those technologies, I don't want us to be left behind. I don't want your community to be left behind. I want to make sure we're ready, willing, and able to go as soon as those opportunities arise. So as we're doing this, I do want you to get the word out. I can tell you, just being at the meetings, the scientific meetings yesterday that I was at, I know that we are far from having everyone out there in Simon Searchlight. And I understand, and I'm not trying to be coercive in terms of requiring anyone to be part of this, but I do want to understand why, in terms of individuals are not participating in research. And if it's just simply a lack of knowledge, or if it's just because it's clunky and there are things that we can do to fix that, do please help us to be able to do that. So within this, I also want you to realize that although we have 4 different genes and 4 different conditions here represented this weekend, You're not alone in the sense that there are literally about 170 different conditions that we're supporting as part of Simon's Searchlight. I've been incredibly interested to understand what I think of as the economies of scale. And so when I listen to the science in each of the sessions with your scientists, one of the things I appreciate is, oh my goodness, we've got this condition over here. And that's very, very similar in many ways to this condition over here that's part of Simon's Searchlight. And how can we now have even more than the individual conditions together? What have we learned from your experience over here that we can now bring to bear here and be able to then advance even faster the work for your conditions? And so I really, truly believe there are enabling technologies. There are data sets that are coming out of this that are going to help all of us. And so the reason for being so sort of overwhelming in terms of the numbers is that they are all tied to, again, as I said, in some way to autism, in the sense that a certain portion of the individuals in each of these conditions have autism. And from Safari's mission, that's a large part of what we're dedicated, or that is what we're dedicated to being able to do. With this, I will say that we ask you to do some things, and you might be wondering why we're asking you to do some of them. And it's because we're trying to think 3 steps ahead. And part of what we're trying to think 3 steps ahead on are what I think of as clinical trials or tests, experimental tests to see whether or not a certain treatment is working. And we want to have ways of being able to evaluate that. And we want them to be rigorous because we don't want to start using a medication or a treatment that's not going to work. We want to make sure it's really going to work. And of course, we want to make sure it's safe. So some of the things that you've been participating on, and I know it seems a little odd, but everything from psychometric evaluations to see how your children are thinking and how they're processing information, how they're walking, how they're talking, all of those things are to get very fine detail to see, are we going to be able to move that needle? Are we going to be able to make improvements? And how might we see some of those improvements? And we want to make it as easy as possible on the participants, on your children, on your family members as we're doing it. We want to hear from you, though, about what's important. So what really would make a difference in your lives? What would make life easier? Is it getting a good night's sleep because your child is getting a good night's sleep and you can get a good night's sleep? Is it stopping seizures? Is it being able to communicate? And it might be verbal communication or some other form of communication, but tell us, because I know the FDA, I've had meetings with them, that's what they care about, right? They want to improve your lives. They want to make a meaningful difference in terms of this. And when we think about how we do that, we need to know what that difference is. Can't be just because I thought it was a good idea. It needs to be because you thought it was a good idea. So as we're doing this, we're trying to do all of this with the idea and listening very closely to what the FDA is telling us about what they would require for some future clinical trial, and being able to listen to them and talk to you and putting those together with the scientists that are doing these evaluations and triangulating all that information to figure out what that is. And like I said, we've heard you and we're listening to you as we're going through those processes. As we're doing this, we are trying to think ahead and be a little out of the box in some cases. So some cases it's really clear what we're looking at. We're doing direct assessments of, how someone is listening and processing information, how they're thinking. In some cases, like I said, there may be things that we're looking at in terms of sleep, and a good night's sleep I talked about, literally how someone is sleeping. Are they going through the regular stages of sleep? Are they getting a really good deep night's sleep as we're going through this? And having ways of measuring that in your own bed, in your own home, not in a sleep lab in a hospital that's completely artificial where no one's going to get a good night's sleep, right? We want to do it in a way that's what is really like real life so that we can understand what that's like and be able to improve that. We're trying to look at things, and some of you are doing EEG measurements, electroencephalogram measurements with us this weekend as we're doing that. And this is, again, a measure that the FDA very specifically has been asking about, making a change in epilepsy or seizures. They realize is really important because if you're having seizures, if you're having electrical storms in your head, it's hard to think straight, it's hard to learn, it's hard to be able to be your best self. And so they have told us, and they prioritized in terms of that's important. Getting that, we call it natural history data, but knowing what that's like without doing an intervention, we are preparing by understanding the variability and what's same across individuals in the community, because it's likely that it's different at different ages. What that looks like when you're 2 is probably different from when you're 12, is probably different from when you're 22. And so again, we're trying to do all this preparation now and trying to make sure also, don't be surprised if you come to another meeting next year and we say, we want to do that same EEG again. And you say, but I just did that last summer in Baltimore. What are you talking about? It's because we want to see, did it change? Is it consistent? Is it reliable? Can we be able in the same person over time to get a consistent measure so that if we do something, if we apply a medicine, we can see that it's changing, that it's actually working as we're doing that. So that's the method to the madness. That's why we're going through all of these things. And we are increasingly, as I said, listening to you. I think COVID, believe it or not, for all of the lemons that COVID gave us, it gave us a little bit of lemonade. And that's that we're thinking about what we can do from home, even more so than dragging people hundreds of miles to come into clinical sites. Are there things that we can do remotely in terms of being able to get data, make it easier, but also more meaningful in terms of what reflection of what your lives are like? So as we're doing this, we are doing this and we're trying to get increasingly sensitive. And so what I mean by that is even though it might be a little change, can we see that we are making a change and help us in the long run to be able to not have to have as many people in trials for as long a period of time? So as we're doing this, I warn you, and I know this is sort of overwhelming, but for those of you who are really the core dedicated group, these are all the different measures that we've been asking folks in Simon Searchlight to do online. If it looks like a lot of measures and it looks like, I think I only filled out one of those surveys, there are probably other ones that you missed in some place, and part of that's because it's hard to navigate, and I know you're incredibly busy, but do check in with us out here and we'll get you up to speed in terms of what you may have missed, and there's still time to catch up. We are going through and adding things. So even though it felt overwhelming, and I apologize that sometimes it does, but we're continuing to expand the things that we're doing with feedback. We have a community advisory council of leadership that's representing you to help us to understand what is needed and what's more meaningful. And so we will continue to make these changes. I will say, and it's incredibly important to me, that our community is growing up. We don't have very many adults yet represented, and even young adults or adolescents, we still have relatively few, but our folks are growing up, and that's a really good thing. And I'm especially paying attention to some of the things that are happening in adults and seeing whether or not we have issues like cancer, issues like diabetes, issues like heart disease, because if we need to start taking care of them, monitoring for them, screening for them, we all need to know about that. So we're going to continue working on that. We are trying to give you back the data. Again, as we're doing it, many of you know are getting individual reports. So as you're doing individual surveys, we're trying to make it meaningful for you, reports that you can take back to your doctor, to your IEP, being able to understand your particular family member. We're also trying to give you information in the aggregate, in the whole, about your condition. And we're trying to do this in a way that's easily digestible. Again, if we're not doing it quite right, you let us know. But we are sending these out with great regularity. And as we're doing this, it is not one and done. Let me repeat this again. It is not N-O-T, one and done. We need to continue to see how things evolve over the life course, how things change, and how hopefully things get better. But if things at some point, for some reason, are not getting better, it's important to be able to understand what factors might be changing that are affecting that. I will say, and thank you for everyone who's been doing the COVID surveys. As you were doing that, and as we were able to see the big impact COVID was having in our communities, that voice collectively had a big impact in terms of policies, in terms of thinking about what our kiddos needed, in terms of their school, in terms of their IEPs. And I know I have heard from several states that have made sure that post-COVID, they're continuing to support and make up some of the difference of the time that we were lost. So these continued longitudinal assessments, still stay tuned for those. As we're doing this, we're also thinking we have another portion of the Safari program, which is dedicated to grants to investigators, and we are working really hard to bring new types of scientists into the field who haven't been thinking about this. Some of them, believe it or not, they're data scientists who haven't thought for a second about neurodevelopmental conditions, but they're really good at analyzing data. And so if we can get them really fine-grained data, we can use all of those data science skills to be able to think about how we see those little tiny changes that we've been talking about, changes that will tell us we're headed in the right direction, double down and keep going in that direction. We also have folks that are thinking about new ways of being able to collect data about behavior. And in particular, thinking about things that are related to sociability, social engagement, expression, verbal language, thinking about those things that mean so much to us. And again, investing in a significant way to make sure that we've got the science, the scientific instruments to be able to collectively gather the data on and have them help us analyzing those data. So as we're doing this, as I said, in preparation for whenever it happens. For some of the communities will be sooner than others. I'll just tell you that's what I'm starting to see. But we're doing this to make sure that we've got those outcome measures for the clinical trials. We also have in parallel a sister study, I call it, besides Simon's Searchlight, another study called SPARK, Simon's Foundation Powering Autism Research for Knowledge. And with that, those numbers are even ginormous compared to our numbers here in Searchlight, because they are agnostic in terms of the underlying cause of autism. It's just anyone with a professional diagnosis of autism. We are in parallel doing many of the things in Searchlight, also in SPARK. And so in a good way, if we identify individuals in SPARK with some of these genetic conditions in your community, we also make sure that they find out about you. And so that way they can also increase in terms of being able to learn from you, being able to contribute to the community. And as we're doing this, all going on this journey together. So with this, I'm getting my time check, so I have to quickly wrap things up. But we are thinking about really, I have to say, to me, mind-blowing technologies. I won't go into the details, but for some of the researchers, ways to be able to be really quantitative as we're doing this. And as I said, being able to help other researchers who want to do a good job be able to do their good job better by introducing them to you through a simple email. And if you're too busy at that time, it's not the right time to do something, simply not responding to that email, but for you to be able to hear everything that's going on around the world, and in many cases do it relatively easily and being able to do it from home. I'm putting a challenge out to all of you. I've heard you loud and clear. We need standards of care. We need something to be able to for you to take to your doctors to make sure that things are covered by insurance, make sure we've got consistency in terms of the care around the world that people need. And in doing this, we want it to be evidence-based, right? It shouldn't be because we're just making this up because it sounds good. We need it to be evidence-based based on the data that we're seeing from the communities. As we're doing this, and I'll put myself out there, I hope we've got a band of clinicians around the world who are willing to do this. But the buck stops here, that if we need to, collectively, we will get it done, right? We will find clinicians around the world to help us look at your data, to be able to think about what those standards of care should be. I will tell you that we put out things called gene reviews, and if you want to Google it, you can see, but to be able to have updated things that have, again, quick places for physicians to go to get the most up-to-date information. If you go to gene reviews and you don't see your condition there yet, it's because we don't have enough data yet to be able to develop these guidelines. And so your challenge is, for each of you, we need to get the numbers up, we need to get the data to be able to have evidence-based gene reviews and clinical care guidelines as we go forward. This is the landscape, which you may not pay attention to, but it's a pretty up-to-date landscape of what's going on in the gene therapy space. And I put this up here because we all have genes, and obviously we'd say to ourselves, well, couldn't you just, Dr. Chung, couldn't you just go in and sort of snip out that one little A and put in that T instead? Couldn't you do some gene surgery for me? Couldn't you do a simple injection and give my son that gene back? We're not there yet at that point, right? There are people, believe it or not, sounds like kind of science fiction. There are people who are thinking about that, who are thinking about literally, how do we get to the brain? How do we get there for a lifetime? How do we get there safely? How do we get there in terms of this gene or that gene? And it differs in some cases, depending on the genetic variant. We're not there yet, right? And so I don't want you to think that you're going to go from here and next summer we're going to come by and we're going to have a station right down the hall here. Everyone's going to get their injection of their gene. It's going to take a while. But on the other hand, if we don't work to start the journey to try and get to that place, whether it's a gene therapy, whether it's a pill, whether it's even just a better way of educating our young people, finding out strategies about how they learn and how we can help them learn better. If we don't start that now, we're not going to get there. So I hope that together we're going to go and be able to move the field forward, move our science forward. So with that, I have, as my husband would say, I've jibber jabbered too long. So I am around at the meeting all weekend. We're going to have a fireside chat up here this afternoon. And at that point, you're going to have time to ask lots of questions. So I'm going to hold the questions for now, but you're going to have time to come back, grab me, grab the clinicians, grab the scientists for questions later. But right now, I want to make sure I've got this right. If you across the hall, literally these rooms right across the hall are where our next sessions are. And we've got kind of breakout workshops that are going on all afternoon. And then we're going to be coming back in this room here at 4 o'clock for the fireside chat. And we're going to have, like I said, lots of experts to be able to answer a lot of your questions. And throughout the meeting, I'm just going to embarrass the scientists. How many of you out in the audience here are scientists? Okay, so what I want you to realize is these folks are all here working for you in one way or another. And so if you have questions, if some of this was like a little bit of gobbledygook and you want to, those hands that you saw raised, I want you to find a friend. Take them and have breakfast with you and find a friend who can help you answer and understand your questions. And I want you to tell them what's on your mind as well. Let them know in terms of what your experience is and what would be meaningful to you. Okay, so with that, we're going to be headed right across the halls right now. And like I said, if you have burning questions, write them down, put them on your phone, and we'll be back to you later this afternoon.